Well, good evening, councillors and officers, and welcome to this council meeting of Wyndham City Council this Tuesday, 30th November 2021. In the spirit of reconciliation, before we begin this meeting, I acknowledge the peoples of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which Wyndham is being built. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present and emerging. Could you please stand for the opening prayer? We pray for guidance in the Council's decision-making to achieve the best outcome for the people of Wyndham. Thank you. Please be seated. I would like to welcome members of the gallery, press, councillors and staff in attendance for this meeting this evening, and also acknowledge that Councillor Mahfood is attending remotely. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the internet. The recording will be archived and made available on Council's website. Whilst all care has been taken to ensure that your privacy is maintained, please be aware that your presence may be recorded. Item 2 on the agenda is apologies and requests for leave. Mr CEO, do we have any apologies or requests for leave?
No, Mr Mayor. Nil.
Thank you. Item 3. Declaration by councillors of disclosure of conflict of interest or conflicting personal interest in any item on the agenda tonight. Councillors, any no? Thank you. Item 4, other reports, 4.1. The report commences, the report is on pages 6 to 8 with attachments on pages 9 to 10. Councillors, we have a report before us and I do ask that you not personalise or individualise this item. So, councillors, can I have a motion, please?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, but I'm also making an amendment to that motion, Mr Mayor, putting forward an alternate. Would you like me to read that out?
Is that the one that was sent this afternoon?
It was, Mr Mayor, yes.
Okay, if I'm happy to take it and read it, but if you want to read it out, if every councillor has it and has read it, or I'll go by what you think, Councillor Shaw.
If people are comfortable with that, I'm happy to do that.
Has everybody read it? Yep. So if you're happy with that, Councillor Shaw?
I am, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Sure. So, Councillor Shaw, you're moving this?
I'm moving the amendment,
you.
alternate, I'm sorry, yes, I am.
Yep, sure. Councillors, do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Marcus. Councillor Shaw, would you like to speak to the motion at this time?
I would like to, thank you, Mr Mayor. It is so pleasing that Wyndham City is on track for more than 95% of our community to be double vaccinated. We were one of the hardest hit municipalities during the peak of the COVID pandemic. The councillors signatory to this motion tonight push for the establishment of a 7-day vaccination hub and an increase in vaccination supply to protect our community from the devastation of COVID on the social and economic fabric of the Wyndham community. We all voted for the vaccination hub at Eagle Stadium and have continued to support it over the last few months. This was a leadership position we all took, and it has been very successful and has protected our community. It would be hypocritical now for Wyndham City Council and all councillors here tonight to not take a stand requiring councillors who were elected by this community to be double vaccinated too. This motion is about protecting the health and safety of our community. If there is any issue that should be able to unite this council, this should be it. Now is not the time to be protecting a mayoral and deputy mayoral deal. Now is the time to be protecting our community and not self-interests. Council staff are required to be double vaccinated under the Chief Health Officer's mandatory health directions. Councillors should be too. Unfortunately, we may lose some council staff due to these mandatory health orders, and yet councillors can remain unvaccinated. Hospitality workers, small business owners, beauty services and a raft of other industries have been forced to adjust to being double vaccinated in order to get back to work and or open for business. Those who have refused are losing their jobs because they refuse to be vaccinated. The Victorian Government's mandatory vaccine requirements has led to the suspension of Victorian members of Parliament who have consciously chosen not to be vaccinated. The councillors who have called for this action believe that the same suspension powers should apply to local councillors. Ratepayers should not be paying for an unvaccinated councillor or councillors to continue who are prepared to put the health and safety of our community, staff and councillors at risk by refusing to access the available vaccinations readily available in our community. It has come to my attention today that some other councils will be following our lead in relation to this motion tonight. If you don't vote for this tonight, you do need to explain, I believe, to the people you represent why you are not voting for this tonight. Just putting your hand up and not explaining why, or maybe putting forward a procedural motion to put the motion for a vote without debate, lacks courage, in my opinion. It is a privilege to be elected to public office. It is entirely reasonable to expect any councillor who is not double vaccinated to consider their position as a representative of our community or be stood down until they are double vaccinated. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillor Marcus, being the seconder, did you wish to speak?
Yes, just very briefly, because I believe Councillor Shaw has spoken brilliantly tonight and extremely well. You've really thought out what you had to say. All I will say is, being a business person, we are very conscious of the fact that we cannot allow anyone into our business. And then I went through last year with an organisation that lost 30 of our beautiful residents to the COVID. So if you had been in that situation, seeing those wonderful residents of this city dying, it's heartbreaking, and we have to be very careful. I'm ready to go for my booster, which I'm pleased to do. And I believe that all councillors, as leaders of this city, really should be all fully vaccinated. Unless we all become fully vaccinated, we are going to have COVID forever. But if we get what the doctors and the scientists are saying, if we are fully vaccinated, there's less chance. And if you then do catch the pandemic, you don't feel nearly as sick. So I implore all councillors to make sure that they are fully vaccinated, to make sure that we have a wonderful city here. We still have quite a few people, although we did a wonderful job on getting the numbers up, but there is still some areas that certainly need to get their second vaccination. So councillors, please tonight consider what we're doing, and I believe that as leaders of this city, I'm proud to be a leader of this city, and I just believe that we should all be vaccinated. You won't get into the Werribee races on Sunday unless you're doubly vaccinated. So we've got 20 people on the gate looking to see who's unvaccinated, and they won't get in. So I think that should be the same in all of the things we do. Absolutely everything. There should not be one rule for one and not a rule for the other one. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, are there any other councillors who wish to speak on this tonight? Councillor Hegeditch.
Thank you. I understand the rights of people to choose not to be vaccinated. I also understand that as elected representatives, we must lead by example. We have had no say in the pandemic rules that govern this state or this nation. We're all aware that there are health orders that exist which mandate staff to be double vaccinated or they could lose their jobs. Yet, despite being a third level of government, we have had no direction where councillors sit in regards to mandatory vaccinations. We know work cover laws apply to councillors, meaning we are all protected when it comes to any health and safety issues. And yet, if this pandemic and all the rules in place are about the health and safety of our community, why has there been no direction requiring the vaccination status of councillors? Whilst there are rules for staff and there are rules for members of parliament, there is no clear position on councillors. To make it worse, any rules that do exist are conflicting. In the last few weeks, we have now been classed as an essential local government service, meaning members of the public can access a council building in certain exemptions, one of which is a council meeting where attendance of patrons through remote electronic means is not reasonably practicable. Does this mean that a councillor who may have internet issues today cannot attend the meeting via remote electronically, can attend the meeting in person, yet the very next day when the internet is up and running cannot sit in the room with the very same colleagues they sat with the previous day? To me, that is absurd. We need some clarity. And for this reason, I will be supporting the motion to seek clarity from the Chief Health Officer and from the Minister for Local Government about where councillors stand at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hegeditch. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Barrera.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll also be supporting this tonight. I'll try not to repeat what others have said, but I think it's widely accepted now across the community that vaccines remain the foundation, the bulwark of protection against the severe effects of COVID-19. We know this because we have many medical experts who have been working around the clock for almost 2 years since the pandemic changed everyone's lives. We are in countries like Australia privileged to have more than one vaccine to choose from available to us. Some countries around the world don't have that privilege, and COVID's persistence globally is partly attributable to uneven access across the globe to vaccine. But here in Melbourne, that's not an issue. Perfectly good vaccines are now available to everyone aged 12 plus. We unfortunately find ourselves increasingly polarised on this issue, rather than grateful for the incredible work achieved over 2 years by scientists, by medical researchers, and from doctors and nurses who have gone above and beyond to protect people in this community. The position of the Victorian Government is clear, and while everyone has their own opinion, the health directions have been unequivocal, with business, with industry, required to comply with COVID-19 mandatory vaccination directions extended to almost every section of the Victorian community. The Victorian Government has required members of Parliament to be vaccinated to ensure that they're no different from anyone else in our community. Councillors, however, are not mandated and fall through the cracks. But councillors are members of those same communities
You have 1 minute
being
left,
asked to
Councillor
do their
Barrera.
bit and to get vaccinated. And as Councillor Shaw said, most people in Wyndham understand that, with 95% of people getting vaccinated. This council's done a power of work to ensure that that's happened, because this community was disproportionately affected compared to other parts of Victoria. I think as leaders in this community, councillors should step up, put the community first above individual interests. They've been elected to represent their communities. That's a privilege, and inherent in that is the requirement to respect the privilege, to demonstrate leadership so that they can perform their role in no less a way than the community should expect. And if it's successful tonight, I welcome a response from the Minister in relation to the current anomaly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrera. Councillor, is there any further discussion on this item? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you. I guess what is important is to put on the public record that I certainly will be obviously voting in favour of this resolution as part of one of...
Councillor Gilligan, could you pull them up?
Part of one of 3 councillors that have called for this meeting. I also want to put on the record that it'll be a matter of history around the people that have spoken up tonight and done the right thing by this community, certainly in relation to this resolution. And I also want to put on the record that as someone who led this city last year during COVID and had to take numerous calls and hear the personal stories of families that were infected with this virus through no fault of their own, it didn't discriminate based on socioeconomic status, where you lived, but it most certainly had a huge impact, whether it was young kids to families to even seniors. People died because of this virus, and it is absolutely critical that this council takes the leadership role of standing up in addition to all that we have done and delivering on the commitments that we have previously voted on and supported on behalf of our community. So I commend Councillor Shaw for her comments, which I certainly echo, but most importantly wanted to put on the record, as with the other voices here tonight, that this is absolutely the right decision moving forward, and I simply put on the record the silence that we're hearing from everybody else. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillor, is there any further discussion on the matter? No further discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? Now, I actually didn't count. Did we count? 5 against. So the motion is carried.
Division?
Call for a division. All those in favour? Councillor McIntyre, Councillor Gilligan, Councillor Shaw, Councillor Marcus, Councillor Hegeditch, Councillor Barrera. Against? Councillor Hill, Councillor Bramesh, Councillor Maynard, and Councillor Zatkowski. Oh, and I do beg your pardon, Councillor Mahfood, I have forgotten on a couple of occasions about the screen, and Councillor Mahfood. All right. Councillors, there being no further items to the agenda for this meeting, I now declare the meeting closed at 6:47. Zatkowski.
Guys, careful.
Yeah.
That will be actually. It's supposed to be a nice day. Take the holiday in. Okay, just come to work on Monday, Stephen. You could, yeah. Our company every day. I'll like come pick you up home and they'll pick you up the race and take you home. No, you're in there. Like, oh, you've got to talk about you, right? Yeah. I know. Yeah, I'm using what the woman I'm not getting I don't want to get picked up by a chance.
Thank you, councillors, for attending tonight. I welcome to the council meeting of Wyndham City Council this Tuesday, 30th November 2021. And in the spirit of reconciliation, before we begin this meeting, I acknowledge the peoples of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which Wyndham is being built. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present. Could you please stand for the opening prayer? We pray for guidance in the council decision making to achieve the best outcome for the people of Wyndham. Please be seated. I would like to welcome members of the gallery, press, councillors and staff in attendance this evening. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the internet. The recording will be archived and made available on council's website. Whilst all care has been taken to ensure that your privacy is maintained, please be aware that your presence may be recorded. Councillors, item 2 on the agenda tonight is apologies and requests for leave of absence. Mr CEO, do we have any apologies or requests for leave?
No, Mr Mayor, none for this evening.
Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda, councillors, is declaration by councillors of disclosure of conflict of interests, conflicting personal interest in any item on the agenda tonight. Does any councillor have?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I do. On item 6.5.6, I have a direct conflict. 6.5.6. Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillors, item 4 on the agenda is confirmation. You'll remind me when we get to that meeting? Sure. Yeah. Confirmation of minutes of previous meeting, and the motion is that the minutes of the council meeting held on Tuesday 26th October 2021 as prepared and circulated be confirmed. Councillors, can I have a mover please? Councillor Zatkowski, a seconder. Councillor McIntyre. Councillors, any discussion? No discussion. I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 5 on the agenda is deputations and presentations. And Councillor Zatkowski, as this was put forward by yourself, would you like to present this item to the meeting?
Yeah, certainly. If you don't mind, Mr Mayor, I'll read it as tabled, just for the record and also just as a acknowledgement of the organisation that I've put forward as a recognition. So Werribee River Association recently celebrated its 40th anniversary, quite a milestone for an area like Wyndham. Council wishes to acknowledge the Werribee River Association's 40-year anniversary, which represents 4 decades of local volunteers working tirelessly to protect one of the city's greatest natural assets, the Werribee River. The association was established in 1981, and just to give some context, I was 1 year of age at that time, by a group of community members who were concerned about the degradation of the Werribee River. Over the years, the association has not only taken hands-on approach to conserving the Werribee River catchment, but also advocates to all levels of government whilst developing and contributing to key strategies that act to preserve the Werribee River. Congratulations to the newly elected board chairperson, Catherine Williams, and all past board members who have made such an outstanding contribution to our city through their hard work with the Werribee River Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zatkowski. Item 6 is Officers' Report, 6.1 Petitions. 6.1.1 is the response to Petition 0621, Construction of Footpath on North Gateway. The report is on pages 8 to 12, recommendation is on page 8. There are nil attachments. Councillor, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Shaw? Thank you. Seconder, please. Councillor Marcus. Councillor Shaw, do you...
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I am going to say a few words on this. I am supporting the response to the petition in relation to the findings and the recommendations from our council officers. This council is doing a lot of work and putting important investment into our footpaths around our city, in particular those areas, some of our older areas around Wyndham that only have one footpath on one side of the road, and and looking to future-proof our city with the work that we're doing around our footpaths. So I will be supporting this tonight in terms of, as I said, the recommendations from council officers. I do want to put on the record too that it's been interesting with the work we've been doing around the footpaths and the number of people that have contacted me who don't want a footpath out the front of their house, who tell me that they've got a perfectly working footpath on the other side of the road. And I do understand and I do listen to their feedback and concerns. I suppose the important thing about this is it is about future-proofing our city. It is ensuring people with accessibility issues, families, young children, have access to good functioning footpaths and connecting footpaths across our city. And I really commend the work that council officers have been undertaking in this space. And I know they do not always get great feedback in relation to this piece of work, but it's actually a really important piece of work that we're doing across our city. We often hear that we don't invest enough in infrastructure. This is a great investment in infrastructure for our city, supports our active transport strategy. So I'll be supporting this tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillor Marcus is a second. Do you wish to speak? No, I don't wish to speak. Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, are there any speakers against this motion? Are there any further speakers for it? There being no further speakers, councillors, I put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Thank you. 6.2 Strategic Report, 6.2.1 Road Management Plan 2021. The report's on pages 13 to 17, the recommendation is on page 13 and attachments pages 18 to 61. Councillors, can I have a mover please? Councillor McIntyre. A seconder please. Councillor Ramesh. Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased this evening to endorse the revised road management plan. I believe it will enhance safety for our community. The road management plan outlines Council's approach to ensuring roads and footpaths are safe for the public to use, and it includes information about how the Council will inspect roads and public footpaths and then repair defects that are found. Thank you to all community members who took the time to complete the survey, phone or email officers. The revised road management plan is a significant improvement. The most important change is an adjustment to the intervention level to improve our footpaths, which will reduce tripping hazards and improve public safety. Put simply, the council officers will intervene earlier when a difference in footpath height is detected. Through this increase in service, the revised plan will improve safety and livability for people with disabilities. This could not be more essential and is a great example of how we are building an inclusive community at Wyndham City. Council officers estimate this additional service will cost $1 million a year, and this is an appropriate investment in our residents' rates to improve infrastructure and make our roads safe. This additional service will reduce injuries suffered by our community members by making it safer to walk, ride and drive in Wyndham. It's good to see also in this document that there is less jargon and it is easier to understand. This plan will help to keep our residents moving more safely throughout Wyndham. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Councillor Ramesh is the seconder. Do you wish to speak?
Just to note that I will be supporting this motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ramesh. Are there any councillors that wish to speak against this motion? Any councillors that wish to speak for it? There being no further speakers, and that I will now put the motion to a vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 6.3 Policy and Advocacy. 6.3.1 Invest in Opportunity Federal Election Priorities. The report is on pages 62 to 66, a recommendation on page 63 and attachments pages 67 to 77. Councillors, can I have a mover please? Councillor Hill. Seconder? Councillor Gilligan. Councillor Hill, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The officers are to be commended for the initiative, which is also a requirement of us, most recent government Act 2020 for the initiative to produce the quarterly community report so that our community is aware of the projects and progress made by Council. The transparency of Council will no doubt will increase the trust towards Council decision and plans and further engage our community with Council.
Councillor Hill, are you talking about
community?
Are you talking about quarterly community report?
Yes.
Yeah. We're actually on the federal election priorities.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. People make mistakes.
Apologise.
That's okay. Are you still wish to speak?
Yes, please. The document highlights some of the key areas that our city needs to advocating for. It's really well written, and we have a lot of discussion among the councillors groups, and I really thank the officer Natalie Walker for producing such excellent report and her team to pull all the report together. And I particularly excited about advocating for Wallaby East employment precinct. As a deputy mayor of a city, I'm committed to attend any opportunities available to meet with the ministers and to advocate for our city leading to the next federal election with the mayor and the CEO. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Gilligan is the second. Do you wish to speak?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think it's worth putting on the record what we do know so far, and I certainly commend the federal member for Lawler on the election commitment for the federal election, if Labor gets elected, up to $50 million to build the Wyndham West Link. This is a critical component around the connectivity from Tarneit to Wyndham Vale, and quite often this is one of the top issues that's raised with me in Chafee Ward, and something that only a Labor commitment has been received. There's been no other commitment from the existing government. And so that, I think, in part demonstrates that the advocacy work done here around explaining why this road, this direct road link from Wyndham Vale to Tarneit, is so critical to the livability of both suburbs and really will unlock the A-League development that's obviously in the middle between Hobbs Road and Sayers Road and Armstrong Road as well in terms of that connectivity. I think one of the critical challenges ahead is really the interfreight terminal as well. This will create jobs. We're seeing a debate again federally where the coalition have essentially tried to wedge in this election to potentially build the interfreight terminal in Melbourne's north. This will be an important battle between Hume and Wyndham about securing jobs. And it's been great to see that at least in the case of, again, the opposition on a federal level, they have committed to deliver that in Melbourne's west. The coalition, however, look to be delivering that in Melbourne's north. So it does, in some respects, open up a further divide about the infrastructure priorities of Labor versus the coalition. So with that in mind, I certainly commend this report, but I thought it was important to put on the record what we do know and really make sure that our community is really clear about extracting a deal from the opposite parties in this election, and that's exactly what we'll do with this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan, and I certainly agree with what your comments are. I do hope that the current government of the day do put that in their commitment. Absolutely. Councillors, are there any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Marcus.
Thank you very much. Well, we've been on about infrastructure in this city for a long time, and I'd like to thank Natalie. I have worked with Natalie because I know some people in the eastern suburbs that have access to our federal members, and we've had them down here before. And in 2013, our slogan was, if there is no infrastructure, there is no growth, and that is 8 years ago. So I have had a meeting today, and I'm willing to speak to two of the federal ministers to see if they will come down here to Wyndham so that we can drive them around and let them see exactly what we need here in the city, because we must make sure that we speak to both the opposition and the members that are in government. And so therefore we we don't know which way the election will go, but we must make sure that we communicate well with both sides of the houses. And I guess I've been asked if I can get Barnaby Joyce too, so I'm working on getting Barnaby Joyce and the National Party as well, because I'll do everything I can to make sure that Wyndham gets noticed.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillor Higginich, you did? Thank you, Councillor Higginich.
Thank you. About a month ago, I virtually met with a minister of the state government and told them that Wyndham's council is keen to activate the East Werribee land. I also told this same minister that I recall sitting in a similar meeting with them about 5 years earlier when I was mayor in 2016 and having exactly the same discussion. I recall having a similar discussion with my fellow councillors in 2009 about the East Werribee land and how it was earmarked as an employment precinct. And I'm sure some around this chamber can recall discussions going back over 30 years. We seem to do a lot of talking, years pass, and we are still no closer to any plans for this land, let alone more employment opportunities for Wyndham residents. With our municipality of 300,000 expected to grow to 500,000 by 2040, and with more than 110 babies being born a week, it is more important and critical than ever before that decisions are made about this land, especially if it's going to take another 5, 10 or even 30 years. So I strongly support this council's position to prioritise East Werribee as one of our advocacy strategies for the upcoming election. Employment opportunities and investment in Wyndham does not happen overnight. As Australia and Victoria starts looking at ways to strengthen the economy as we emerge from this pandemic, it is an opportune time to provide employment opportunities for construction of vital infrastructure such as the Western Intermodal Freight Terminal and the Outer Metropolitan Ring Road Corridor. And so now is the right time to strongly advocate for investment in these opportunities in Wyndham. So I'm looking forward to working with this council and our officers as we communicate our needs for the Wyndham to the federal candidates in the upcoming election. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hegeditch. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Mahfood, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Just briefly, Mr. Mayor, I think a lot of things have been touched on, but I just want to put on record how important this motion is being put before us and how important this document is. These aren't just wants; these are needs for our city. We're look at the majority of things that have been put in there is transport links, moving people around the city, and jobs. That's what we need in this city. We've been very careful with what we've put as a need. Again, not a want. So I'd like to say, let's ask for a $150 million new arts centre in our city. But, we're being careful. We're asking for exactly what we need to move forward as we're taking the huge amount of growth for the state of Victoria and a huge amount of growth for the whole country as a whole. I think it's vital that the federal government does look at our needs and we, at the point where we're playing so much catch up, we're really needing to get some of this infrastructure underway. Again, the East Werribee precinct is vital importance. That's been shelved, been sort of stuck on the back burner. We really need to get that moving too. So I highly commend this motion that's been put before us and totally supportive. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mahfood. Councillors, any further? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I support this report and motion tonight, and I would like to thank Natalie Walker and her team for the amount of work that they do in relation to this. It takes a long time for us to work through our priorities and put them forward, and a lot of work goes into it, which is fantastic. So thank you for that. I won't repeat what a lot of people have said about East Werribee. I think we're all on the same page when we talk about the need for that site, and it's certainly going to be our number one advocacy, not just for the federal election coming up, but also most certainly from my perspective from a state election as well. The structure plan was completed in 2013 and we haven't seen any movement on that apart from the Australian Education City, which was declined by the state government. We're still not clear why, so we're looking forward to seeing that reactivated. We've talked about Wyndham Westlake, which is really important. The only other one I want to talk about is sports infrastructure. I know we have put in this that we do need a major new indoor sports and aquatic facility. We do. It's going to cost us millions and millions and millions of dollars, and ratepayers should not be the only ones that need to fund that. Our federal and state governments should be coming to the party and assisting us in the infrastructure that we need to support our growing community. It does seem that the burden to invest and put together that infrastructure for our community is generally being left to the ratepayer, and that needs to change certainly over the next few years. And the federal and state elections are going to be the opportunity for us to advocate to do that. So thank you again, Natalie and team, and I look forward to seeing some of these priorities come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too don't want to repeat everything that others have said. I did want to just echo what Councillor Shaw had said, and that was the point that I was going to make about sports infrastructure. We need to have those bigger sporting facilities which cost, 100 and odd million. We need that support of federal and state government in supplying those, and that was a key one that yes, I was going to raise, but Councillor Shaw has already raised it. So I just wanted to echo that how important it is for our communities. We know our community needs to be more fit, more healthy, more active on so many different levels. We need this infrastructure, and as a municipality and growing as fast as we can, we do not have the money to keep supporting these infrastructure on our own. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and that's what I wanted to add.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Councillors, any further discussion on the matter? No further discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 6.4, Strategic and Town Planning, there is nil. Other reports. 6.5.1, Quarterly Community Report for Quarter 1, 2021-2022. The report is over the pages 78 to 81. Recommendations on page 78, attachments pages 82 to 119. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Hill. A seconder. Councillor Shaw. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The officers are to be commended to produce the quarterly community report so that the community is aware of the projects and progress made by Council. The transparency of Council will no doubt increase the trust towards Council decisions and plans and further engage our community with Council. As a Learning City portfolio holder, one of the highlights of the report is that we have several community centres being built and planned for, which is an exciting item. As we know, a lot of lifelong learning activities happen in the community centres. It is not just a place to learn, it's also a place for people to meet and to socialise, and lots of exciting conversations start from our community and learning centres. Some of us here attended the opening of the Daniela Community Centre in Tanit West the other day. The design of the centre was quite impressive. I hope the community will feel like home when they do their learning, socialising and other activities in the community centres. Just one comment of the report is that hopefully future reports will be able to include the amount or percentage funded by the state government to show our appreciation to the state government in their contribution to our capital works in this city. In short, the quarterly community report is highly appreciated by Council. Congratulations to the CEO, Natalie Walker, and the team, and the people who pull all this report together for such wonderful initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Shaw, being the second, do you wish to speak? No, thank you. Councillors, any councillors wish to speak against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe the quarterly community report is an important document to show how we're progressing against the council plan. The infographics and the scale and numbers tell a clear picture of a council that's continuing to deliver through some extremely difficult times for our community. For our community to have reached a double vaccinated level of 95% of over 12-year-olds is an amazing achievement, driven by council teams in collaboration with all the key stakeholders, including our trusted community advocates and leaders. My concern here with this report is that too rosy a picture is portrayed. Green is progressing, but I think there are key issues struggling to be delivered. There is only one initiative here that is listed as behind and one listed as not yet started. That is to pursue initiatives that reduce litter, public waste across the city and promote community awareness in line with community expectations. And I would also flag that areas like building neighbourhood and city pride, response to dump rubbish, provision and maintenance of public toilets should be listed here and flagged as amber 2. plus parts of ensuring compliance with environmental planning and building regulations and local laws while promoting awareness to encourage voluntary compliance. Nature strips, vacant blocks, out-of-control gardens in residential properties. Our city and places look terrible, and we need to own that and we need to get it back on track. It's here in our council plan, it should be reflected on our community quarterly update. We want people to be proud that they live here in Wyndham. Also, finally, under Green City, it is create green spaces that are well maintained and attractive for all, which includes parks, playgrounds and maintenance of trees. We know how important our open spaces are, but failure demanding complaints from our residents show that we aren't always delivering this, whether it's through complaints to the council directly, to us as councillors or in surveys. Owning the poor presentation in parts of our municipality and what are we going to do to deliver to turn it around is crucial. Working together collaboratively to make it indeed a city we can be proud of. So, lots of work done, which is great, but we need to deliver more to ensure we are truly delivering this council plan. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Marcus?
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the council officers for the work they've done. Over the last 2 years, it's been very tough, and for once we've had a lot of wonderful rain, which has caused the overgrown nature strips and medium strips and absolutely everything else. And I'd like to say that our Chief Executive Officer is doing a drive round with me on Monday to talk to many of the business people, and I think that's absolutely wonderful that we've got you here, Stephen. It's not been done for a long, long time, so thank you. And the people that we've lined up for the visits on, I'm really looking forward to getting stuck into you. But look, we have to work out better ways of how we communicate with our residents. I've just proved it with the competition I've done. There is a way to do it, and the person that did it has done a wonderful job. It went Australia-wide, it went overseas, and also what we've got to look at is how we are going to get to our community members to bring them more on. We can have a whole lot of competitions and all that type of thing. I still feel that we don't put enough into our 60-year-olds and plus, which that's one thing we've got to look at. Business is going to be a problem. I just had Vic Uni wanted to interview me about the businesses that are suffering with, their losses are down to 30% and some of them might not be able to recover. So that's on page 104. Marketing and tourism, well, I'd like to thank Emily Keogh, and of course before Emily there was Fiona, and they're doing a wonderful job on the tourism, so hopefully now that it's all open we'll be able to bring a lot more people to this city. And of course the activity centres. It is a growing city. I mean, I've been here and seen it grow from 13,000 to what it is today, but I think if we get the community on board we will be able to do even more. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, any further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 6.5.2 Financial Management Report Quarter 1 2021-2022. The report's on pages 120 to 124. The recommendation is on page 121 with attachments on 125 to 138. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Gillian, and seconder, will you be happy, Councillor Hegeditch? Councillor Gillian.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I think taking the point that Councillor McIntyre made in the earlier item about the importance of accountability, I certainly agree with regards to the amenity of the city, the presentation of the city pride. But it is worth also noting in the context of this report that there is a significant underspend in relation to the beautification components that Councillor McIntyre was mentioning, in part due to the pandemic, but perhaps an aspect of accountability about whether the call was made quick enough to get back into full capacity as opposed to in an earlier sense than what perhaps the call that ultimately was made if that makes sense. I hope that came out a little bit convoluted. But I guess what I'm saying is that that will in some part go a long way to explaining why we do have a lot of catch up to do on that. In relation to the report around user fees, I do want to continue to be absolutely clear that I do not see the RDF in terms of additional revenue as any justification to offset losses or costs in other departments. When I say that, it's simply not appropriate that this council continues to rob Peter to pay Paul, sorry, Councillor Maynard, in order to justify our existing operations. I always and have always believed that any additional revenue should always be reinvested back into the RDF, and that includes any ad hoc additional revenue that may be generated due to additional commercial activities in this space. So I just wanted to put that again on the record, and I'm sure we'll continue to have this debate about the type of model that will exist in the RDF heading into 2022 and the entirety of the term. The other item that I think is significant is that this report talks to a higher than expected capital income. So in other words, more assets taken on than what may have been projected. This continues the conversation about the renewal component of this organisation. As again Councillor McIntyre touched on, we're making improvements around asset renewal from 30mm to 20mm for footpaths. There's an extra $1 million. All these little things add up around asset renewal, and the challenge ahead for this city will be to deal with that not now, but in that medium-term period, 5 to 10 years away, when we continue to see those cost impasses and having to make choices about the types of projects that get funded in Capital Works program. I've been very clear about the importance of this council front on talking about the prioritisation of Capital Works rather than a 10-year projection that doesn't really talk to the types of projects that may or may not be prioritised. And then there's dealing with the additional assets that we take on. So I think this is a policy challenge that the CEO must continue to work on through the relative directorates, whether that means holding developers to account to do more of their fair share, not simply getting away with dumping us with the backlog of problems that we then have to use ratepayer funds that no one projected we need to raise, and we already have a cap on the amount of taxation that we can raise in order to fund those forward infrastructure projects and assets that need to be maintained. So with that in mind, that's my contribution on this report. Thanks, Mr. I was going to say Madam CEO, Mr. Mayor.
We're going to promote me, Mr. CEO. You did it with two minutes to spare. Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillor Hegeditch, do you, as a seconder? No? Any councillors wish to speak against this motion? Against?
Yes.
Against. Councillor Marcus.
As you all know, that I voted against the long-term financial plan, and I'm very concerned with what I see here. We need to make sure that we're looking more closely at the VAGO reports. We need to make sure that we're getting more grants from state and federal governments to help us support the infrastructure we need, and I think we're going to be in, if we continue down this path, I think we'll be in trouble in about 3 to 4 years. And the business people are looking very closely at the financial reports, and they are very concerned with what they're seeing. I think we've got to do more benchmarking to see, you know, why we're a little bit behind some of the other councils, and that's how I feel. So no, sorry, I would like to speak to the financial people to say that there's a lot of, we need to have a really good look at this financial management report and then go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, is there any speakers for this motion? No further speakers. Councillor Gilligan, as there is a speaker against, you have the right to reply.
No, thank you.
Oh, no, sorry, okay. I was writing, I thought you were going to speak. My apologies. Councillors, I put it to the vote then. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 6.5.3, response to notice of motion 607, improving library services in Wyndham. The report is on page 139 to 147, recommendation page 139, attachments 148 to 174. Councillor Canova, mover please. Councillor Hill. Seconder.
I'll second that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Mahfood. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I would like to give a massive thanks to our library team for their creativity and diligence in producing such a report to my notice of motion. Such a great report. Instead of the traditional ways of how libraries should operate, the report illustrates several different models which change the library service and strategy compared to what we offered in the past. There were 6 different models being proposed. The main flagship library, library hub, library lounge, pop-up van, book locker, vending machines, and our traditional community learning center libraries. These models are widely used around the world, but are not yet widely used in our country. For the first time, the word flagship library has appeared in council document. I'd like to give a big credit to our officers, Alison Kenwood, Georgie Hill, and her team. I look forward to the discussion and report in the next couple of months about this. The team has definitely worked really hard over the past 1 year. Now we have the detailed data showing where the library service that is most in need. We can also now justify council's decision and plan for our future libraries to see if this validates the need and plan as described in the state government's precinct structure plan for 4 future libraries in our city, where they should be, what they should look like, and how we could deliver them. The report continues our innovative approach to libraries. Early this year, we've successfully obtained the state government's funding to purchase a pop-up van to deliver library books to areas that are far from our current libraries, such as Werribee South and Little River and Saltwater, just to name a few, which will be in operations early next year. Last Monday, it was such an honor for me to launch the book locker vending machine in Williams Landing Shopping Centre. From the feedback that I received so far, it was extremely popular. It's a new initiative by council to bring the library service into our community to save time, as residents can now book online and collect the books at their local shopping centre. Bringing the library service to our community via different models will hopefully promote a reading culture in our society. The report tonight identifies a correlation between new growth regions and higher demand for library services, including the areas of Point Cook, Williams Landing, Truganina, and Tarneit and Manor Lakes. These are areas with young families, children going through education, and parents seeking to progress their careers. I was particularly impressed by the data presented in the report. The graphics or the visual representation in this report is absolutely fantastic. It is evidence-based, and the data has shown us very clearly areas that is in need of libraries access and library infrastructure. In my view, the data clearly identifies areas such as Point Cook, Williams Landing, Truganina, and Tarneit, and Manor Lakes families use the library the most. Point Cook, for example, has a checkout ratio of library collections, 333,000 collections, which was 6 times more than the library in Werribee. Perhaps the limited floor size of the Werribee Library discouraged the residents to visit the library. On the other hand, Hoppers Crossing Library, which has the biggest floor space, conveniently located in the middle of a shopping mall, had the biggest catchment area in Wyndham. Perhaps people just want to go to a big library. They can find any books that they want to borrow, which indicate the need of a flagship library in our city. The data shows a very high usage of library by residents from Point Cook South, Williams Landing, Truganina, and Tarneit West, despite they don't have a local library facility at all within close proximity to those suburbs.
One minute, Councillor Hill.
Sorry?
1 minute left.
Okay, thank you. The fact that the residents in this area are willing to travel a return of 20 to 30 minutes car journey does not mean that they should not have access to a library infrastructure in their local area. The data clearly illustrate that there was such pressure for Point Cook Library and Julia Gillard Tarneit Library, especially both the ratio of public access floor space to the population also fell way below 50% of Australian standard. Current public library benchmark in Australia indicates that planning of a new library building should allow for 28 square meter PFSX. In fact, only one of our libraries reaching this standard, which is Hoppers Crossing Library, and is a leased library. Currently, the centralised library model mainly serves the user with cars, which was shown in a library survey. If we want to encourage our residents to read, we need to make sure the library service is accessible by our residents, close to public
Councillor Hill,
transport,
can you finish
shopping
up, please?
centre.
Can you sum up?
Thank you. Last but not the least, please allow me to emphasize the important libraries. Libraries are important assets of our city. They are safe space for young people, especially students with domestic violence at home. Libraries is full of mystery and knowledge. It's a great gateway to the outside world. I'm looking forward to the discussion with the Library Service
Mr. Mayor,
Action
point
Plan.
of order.
Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry.
You're most welcome. I did give you an extra 8 seconds, but 5 minutes is 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor, no? Yep. Yep. Councillor Mahfood, as the seconder, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think Councillor Hill's summed up most of what a lot of us are thinking, so I'll be brief and I'll stick to my time limit. I wanted to second this motion because I absolutely love libraries, love books, I love libraries. And when you think about in recent years or recent decades, as we've entered into this digital age, people said books are finished, libraries are over. You know, we're not going to need libraries anymore. We're not going to need the four walls anymore. As more people turn to their Kindles and their devices to read, that was simply the quote at the time, that libraries are gone, books are gone, but they're not. They're still so relevant. They're important infrastructure, important services, as important as ever. So I'd like to take this moment also to thank Councillor Hill for bringing this notice of motion to us in the first place. I'd like to thank the staff for the huge amount of work, and there has been a huge body of work that's been put into this report. Libraries, like I said, although they're still here, they're evolving, they're changing, and I don't need to go through, I was going to mention the different types of libraries. I think Councillor Hill mentioned that a lot. I'm really proud that we're looking beyond the traditional setting of a library and looking how we can bring these library services into the community. We can't build a library in every suburb. I wish we could. I wish we could build more. I wish we could spend more money. It's just another thing, as we mentioned earlier, about the funding we're needing from the other levels of the government. This is just another area where we're needing more funding so we can build more libraries. But I'm glad that Wyndham City is looking at different models and how we can deliver these services, whether it's the pop-up, the mobile lounge, or the pop-up library. So libraries are here to stay. I'm so glad to see that, so proud to see that, and glad that we're continuing to evolve and continuing to bring these services to our community. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mahfood. Councillors, are there any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do agree with Councillor Hill. They are safe spaces, which is probably why you need to be double vaccinated to enter one. But I would like to thank council officers again for the work that they've done on this. So Alison Kenwood and team, I know a lot of work has gone into this, and certainly taking feedback from councillors as well. So I really appreciate that. The only one I did want to flag, and I know we'll get more time to talk about that next year because the action plan is going to be developed next year and it will come to council for a discussion, is this flagship library. Here we are putting another $30–40 million program onto our infrastructure list. I understand it's probably still a number of years away, but I do think it's a conversation that we need to be having as a council or group. We do have a number of options here that we can be providing library services to our community, and I do think we need to have a good discussion around whether a flagship library is something that is needed in our community at that kind of cost, and can we provide the services that we need to our community in the other options and the other ways. I do note that it has been indicated that it would go into the East Werribee site. I think we've had a number of discussions about this in this chamber, and recently again that there is no plan for East Werribee, so a flagship library most likely would be many years away from being at that site. So what will be the options outside of that? But again, thank you for the report. It's very detailed. It's a really important one. And it was great to see a number of people from our community participate in the community consultation and give their feedback on our library services. It is a great service that this council provides, and whatever we do in this space, I know will only continue to enhance that service for our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillors, any further? Yep, Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. When you purchase land or a land and house package in Tarneed or Tarneed West, you pay a developer tax. And that is a tax that's paid, that's associated to proposed social infrastructure that is expected to be delivered in those communities. And in the case of Tarneed West and Tarneed, there are two proposed projects that are expected to be delivered. There is the Riverdale project and the Tarneed North project. And I've obviously expressed concerns on this item in the past about whether or not we would see a funded library via stealth in Truganina, despite no evidence showing that it is required to go there. And I am absolutely grateful for the officer work that has vindicated that point, that Truganina, in terms of prioritisation, does not need a library when compared to Tarneed North and Tarneed West. However, we do know internally that there is not enough money to fund both. So this continues to be an ongoing conversation around how it is the case that a state planning document can be promised upon a community and we don't have enough money to actually build the two libraries that the state has said we should be delivering. This is another example of the constant failure of our planning system in moving ahead of the game and thinking about the type of services that should be provided in our communities. There are young people that are going to be worse off under this arrangement. There is generations that get impacted based on the decisions that have been made in terms of the type of housing development that goes out into these urban sprawl areas, and then people that quite rightly pay a tax, they pay for that infrastructure, and then they don't get it. And in the case of this situation, I'll continue to be a strong advocate against the idea that we simply amalgamate those two libraries into one, except for where we make sure that the land that is allocated in the case of Oakbank is preserved for social infrastructure. So this will be an important challenge ahead around how Council grapples with the budgetary challenges moving forward. But as I have said at an officer level, allocate it. If there isn't enough money, let us go out as a community and fight for it. People were promised two libraries in Tarneed North and over in Riverdale. They deserve those libraries, and if we don't have the money to deliver them, then we need to ask the state why they've created a developer tax system that fails them and our communities when they were promised something and we can't deliver it because we can't, in the form of local government, deliver on that taxation. It is a shameful thing, and it is something that this report has revealed, and we have to continue to advocate in a series of advocacy issues that we face. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Barrera.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I don't want to say too much. I'd really just, like others, echo congratulations to council officers on this really detailed, comprehensive report. I think it's fair to say it's a really responsible report at this point in time. There are still discussions and decisions that need to be had and made. This report responds to lots of challenges of population growth, lack of infrastructure. We know that there'll be some tough decisions to make in the future, but I think the report has tried to be innovative. It's tried to provide equitable access to people across the municipality. That hasn't been an easy thing to do. So well done to council officers for trying to do it and working within the constraints that we're faced with. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrera. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too don't want necessarily to repeat what's already been said. Libraries are very relevant and it's important, and I wanted to add my voice to the fact again that the state government needs to contribute effectively to the service, not just nominally. We need, as this report says, to look at those different models. There may be less cost involved and maybe is more effective. Looking at our assets effectively in relation to what we already have, such as opening hours and the services offered. It's important that not just the new areas that have been developed are considered, but existing areas like Saltwater and Point Cook. So we do need to ensure that the state government puts their hands up. We've looked at the federal ask today, but we will be looking at the state government ask, and it's just very important that our ask in relation to this area is very clear and loud. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Councillors, any further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 6.5.4, naming of new community centres in Truganina South East and Tarney North. The report is over pages 175 to 179 with a recommendation on page 175. New attachments. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Barrera. A seconder, please. Councillor Hill. Councillor Barrera.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, I welcome this motion, this recommendation by council officers to endorse the two names for the new community centres in Tarneit and Truganina due to open in 2022. I think it's fantastic that council has been able to engage with the Bunurong Land Council in order to propose the two names before us tonight, Kumaltadi and Bembit Bagrook. It recognises the fundamental right of First Nations peoples to be involved in the decision-making processes of government, particularly those related to official naming processes, and it aligns really nicely with council and the work that's being done currently on the new updated Reconciliation Action Plan. The relationship between First Nations people and the land is still as prevalent and relevant today, in fact probably more relevant in recent times, as it has been for 60,000 years or more. And it's fitting to acknowledge that First Nations footprints across the lands of the municipality and across time by recognising the importance of First Nations names that link name to place. Both community centres will provide kindergarten, maternal child health and other family services, and I hope that the names, if endorsed tonight, will play a role in increasing a sense of inclusion as well as cultural safety for the women and the children who will predominantly access these services. This is a way to reclaim and preserve words from Bunurong language that may otherwise be lost. It'll also be a reminder of how meaningful this space now is and how nomenclature does matter in a contemporary, more mature Australia, gradually coming to terms with the impact of its colonial roots. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrera. Councillors, any further discussion on this matter? No. Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
It's okay, I'll go by Madam, that's fine.
Madam Mayor.
You'll get used to it.
Look, I don't intend to support this evening for two core reasons. The first is that there is currently legal challenge in the courts around who has ultimate ownership and coverage of the sites that we're now talking about endorsing names for. That in part leads to a question around why we would then vote to pursue this now as opposed to considering it further down the track. So it's not a principal question of whether or not we should consider this item so much as it is when, and on the basis of court action being taken where there is a dispute over the ultimate ownership of land, it would make sense, in my opinion, then to hold off naming sites after a certain party when that party is currently subject to a dispute. The other reason why I don't support this is a consideration around how we prioritise the naming of centres. This is always a polarising topic. In my opinion, the question is around the type of recognition and the appropriateness of the recognition versus the reality of how it works in practical terms. And I must say, I think some community members will refer to these sites not in the names that are proposed this evening, but in the simple names of the Tarneit, as we use Dianella as an example, Tarneit West Community Centre, people are using the locations in which the community centres are built as the principal names of those centres. And I have voted in the past and have a clear record around the naming of centres around local living legends, and of course that has been opposed by this council over the course of the term. Notwithstanding that, again, I make the point about I appreciate the symbolism of naming buildings in recognition of the RAP, the Reconciliation Action Plan. However, we must also consider it in practical terms about will our community adopt and foresee this and truly accept this. And I was looking at the census data as an example in Tarneet, and 0.5% of the population there is Indigenous. We have a significant multicultural community, and again, this is about place and whether or not the approach that we are taking doesn't reflect community expectations around just simple naming community centres in the place in which someone lives. And, you know, again, some people may take a view that this is more education awareness than not, but in my opinion, for those two reasons, I'm opposed to this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Any further councillors that wish to speak on this matter? Councillor Barrera, is there a speaker against? You have the right of reply.
Thank you. Look, just to say that currently the Bunurong Land Council are the recognised traditional owners. Council have done the consultation with that group. Whatever legal action takes place will probably be years away from being completely determined. Apart from that, the language is the same. So whatever it gets named in Bunurong language, it will be the same. So it's not just about symbolism, it's actually the right thing to do. Our community, I think, is gradually maturing. It's the right time for these discussions and it's the right thing to do. These community centres are going on land that is Aboriginal land. Always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So it's the right thing to do. And having had a career of over 40 years working with multicultural communities, I know multicultural communities are incredibly interested in the history of this country and the history of First Nations people and what has happened in this country. They want to know, and I think they'll support it. So I don't think legal action is a reason to not endorse this tonight. We're talking about the same language group.
Thank you, Councillor Barrera. Councillors, I've now put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 6.5.5 Wyndham Accessibility Action Plan Year 2 Progress Report. The report is on page 180 to 187 with a recommendation on page 81. There are no attachments. Councillors, can I have a mover? Councillor Hegadich. A seconder, please. Councillor Gilligan. Thank you. Councillor Hegadich.
Thank you. This Friday, the 3rd of December, is International Day of People with Disability. It is a day to celebrate the achievements of people with disability and also promote awareness, understanding and acceptance in the community. It is therefore an opportune time the Wyndham Accessibility Action Plan Year 2 Progress Report is tabled with Council. One of the concerns Council had when lockdowns began in March 2020 was a concern for people falling through the gaps, especially our vulnerable community, such as people with disability. People fall through the gaps when they become disengaged from their regular support networks, whether they be their care providers, social activity groups, or professional healthcare services. This progress report talks to the activities that Council undertook to minimise the impact of this and the work Council did to increase accessibility and inclusion for our residents. At the height of the pandemic, NDIA decreased the evidence-based requirement for participants to purchase devices such as iPads. In doing so, our NDIS residents, who previously may not have had reliable technology, we're now able to access the device, allowing them to participate in online events or attend to activities and essential services. The continued online connection enabled people to access and remain engaged with their support services and also assisted in reducing social isolation. To this end, Council secured funding to boost psychosocial support services through the introduction of such things as the check-in and chat service and the community connector service. This enabled Council to provide support to local organisations who were then able to transition their social supports, workshops and other classes online, therefore enabling an ability to continue to provide accessible and inclusive services for our community members. Whilst the report talks on some positive experiences, the report also identifies the complexities that people with disability have had due to the pandemic. For example, whilst mass vaccination hubs have been great for administering jabs to the mainstream community, attendance to these hubs for people with disability has been difficult, meaning vaccination for our most vulnerable community members was slow. Nevertheless, I hope that the last 18 months have proved and provided our council, the state and federal governments, as well as mainstream service providers, a deeper understanding of the barriers that people with disability face on a daily basis. As the Healthy Cities portfolio holder, I'm looking forward to working with the community, council officers and councillors in the development of the new Accessibility Action Plan in 2022. For me, this plan will provide an opportunity to include not only the learnings from the last 18 months, but also to broaden the conversation on physical accessibility through better footpath connection, better access to buildings, or better availability of clean toilets and change room for people with disability or special needs. So, as with the ethos of International Day of People with Disability on Friday celebrates the achievements of people with disability and promoting awareness, understanding and acceptance of people with disability, it is fitting therefore that I'm able to wholeheartedly support this report and support this motion this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Hegadich. Councillor Gillingham, as a seconder, do you wish to speak?
Very briefly, thank you. Well said, Councillor Hegadich, and I think there's been some inroads that were made in the last term. I recall Werribee South, I think, was proposed as an upgrade from memory. They're practical projects around accessibility for people with disability. But it is worth noting that about 10% of the nation are recognised as having a disability, and that we're at 12.6%. So we're above average in terms of that space. And I think council government intervention in conjunction with state and the Commonwealth is critical, and it does deliver practical results on the ground, as is mentioned in this report. So I do endorse this report, and I certainly endorse the remarks of Councillor Hegadich. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Gillian. Councillors, are there any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I note here the motion is to be aware of the Year 2 progress report. I still think we've got a lot of work to do, and I echo Councillor Hegedich's comments on that broadening of the brief. I too agree things like the maintenance, our footpaths, access to our facilities, you mentioned toilet facilities, all of those. I think there are key things which I'm hearing as a councillor all the time, so I just really look forward to that broadening of that brief and look forward to hearing back on Year 3's progress. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor McIntyre. Councillors, any further discussion on this matter? There being no further discussion, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. 6.5.6, proposal for new lease, Werribee Football Club. Oh, Councillor Shaw, sorry. Item 6.5.6, proposal for new lease, Werribee Football Club, non-retail lease inclusion of athletes performance hub. The report's page 188 to 194, recommendation page 189. There are no attachments. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Barrera. Councillor Marcus, are you happy to second that? Councillor Barrera.
Yeah, just very briefly, Mr Mayor. Look, obviously I'll be supporting this motion tonight. I think this is a great opportunity for Werribee Football Club to utilise the fantastic facilities they have, to diversify the activities that they offer, the services, and at the same time, and really importantly, to be able to source additional revenue through the creation of an athletes hub, which I'm sure will be welcomed and well utilised by the community. The proposal will allow Werribee Football Club to play an even stronger role in the community than it already does, and it, in a way that I think is a good way to expand its services across the community. It'll also mean that they can attract and retain staff that will value add to what they already do to the club's offerings, and I think the benefits to the broader community from heading in this direction is great. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brewer. Councillor Marcus is the second. Do you wish to speak?
Thank you. Yes, look, I'm totally in favour of this lease. I have the pleasure of living opposite, and I see the work that they do. I've worked closely with Mark Penaluna, and I think they'll only go on to bigger and better things, and they're talking about triathlons and all that type of thing. The only problem is councillors. There is not enough car parking, and when they have their football season, you can go down and find 50 people for parking on our nature strips, and that is something that I think the council need to look at, that there is inadequate parking in that area for the Werribee Football Club. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, are there any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers in support? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I just want to put on the record my absolute support for this project, and in particular commend Martin Carter and the board, as well as Mark Penaluna, for seeking to diversify the revenue streams, as Councillor Barrera has stated. And that is important. I think at times like this, it is important to recognise the contribution that the Werribee Football Club makes to our community. And I appreciate that sometimes we've been on the opposite sides in terms of the applications before us on matters such as gaming venues. But it is equally important that when you have applications like this, that we are absolutely behind you as a community football club. And I think it was important, at least from my point of view, as someone who has been a very strong campaigner against reliance on pokies, that then it would be equally expected that I am a strong advocate in favour of opportunities like this with your football club. So thank you to the board for coming up with alternative ways. We're with you on these types of projects, and I look forward to voting in favour of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, are there any further speakers on this motion? No further speakers. I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Councillors, the next item on the agenda is 6.5.7, proposal to lease 4 council-owned sites to early years partners in the delivery of kindergarten services. The report is on pages 195 to 204 with a recommendation on 196 and no attachments. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Hill. A seconder, please. Councillor Ramesh. Councillor Hill, you wish to speak on this?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just very briefly, the recommended early years partners have been carefully chosen by the officers, and they have good reputation in providing children's services. Therefore, I would like to support the officers' recommendation. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Ramesh, do you wish to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just very briefly, we know that the kindergarten services are much needed in the area, and any step towards fulfilling the demand is welcome. So I endorse the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ramesh. Councillors, any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to note the notion of a partnership fund that's part of this proposed resolution. And that fund essentially talks to a contribution of $20,000 per annum from each partner. And as part of that, we intend to use some of those funds around advocacy and campaigns for government reform. So I want to commend that component of this proposed resolution by Alison's unit, because that in part continues that conversation around the service delivery model, but also equips us to have a greater scalability around campaigning for things like I Love Kinder, but actually entrenching that into informed evidence base that could go into a grassroots campaign around having that long-standing reform on state and Commonwealth level. So I think that is an innovative idea that I've not seen. I was impressed by that, and I just wanted to put that on the record as part of voting in favour of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Golding. Councillors, any further discussion on this matter? There being no further discussion, I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 6.5.8, Biannual Report of the Audit and Risk Committee. Reports on pages 205 to 208, recommendations on page 205, and attachments are pages 209 to 222. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor McIntyre. Seconder, please. Councillor Hill. Councillor McIntyre.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to speak to this item as one of the councillors who are on the Audit and Risk Committee, along with Councillor Sahana Ramesh and Councillor Adele Egertich in the last year as Mayor. The Audit and Risk is an advisory committee mandated by the Local Government Act 2020. It provides important independent governance for the organisation in line with its responsibilities under the Charter. In focusing on greater public accountability, the Act requires that the Audit and Risk Committee provides two key reports to be tabled at a council meeting. Both are here tonight. The first is the annual assessment undertaken by the committee of its performance against the Charter. That is an assessment based on a survey of all committee members and the senior executive against a broad range of criteria testing the capability and effectiveness of the committee. The results indicate satisfactory performance against each of the criteria, and as such, no changes to the current recommendations have been recommended. The second is the biannual Audit and Risk Report that describes the activities of the Audit and Risk Committee and includes its findings and recommendations. As noted in the comments by the Chair, Council's risk culture continues to mature, and it's pleasing to see strong engagement by members of the executive team and officers. There's been good open discussion, and requests for information have been met and recommendations taken on board. Strategic risks are proactively reviewed, which is particularly important, and I'd even say critical, given the continued uncertainty in a COVID-impacted environment. I'm looking forward to the future meetings, with our next one in December planning to be here in person. The first one we've managed in that format as part of such an important governance forum. Councillors not part of the committee but who want to understand more about the working of the committee are able to attend, and at our last Audit and Risk Committee, Councillor Jasmine Hill attended an observer. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Councillor Hill is a seconder. Do you wish to speak to this? No, thank you. Councillors, any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be supporting this tonight, but I just wanted to put on the record that there are some councillors that do attend these meetings that have been appointed, or we are going to be talking about that in the next item. Yet I don't feel like I'm across some of the issues that are being discussed at these meetings, and I think it is incumbent on those councillors who are representing the councillor group who get appointed to these committees that do provide an update to their colleagues on a more regular basis. In particular, I agree with Councillor McIntyre around strategic risks. There are a number of things around COVID, our operations, etc. And I think it's important that the people that this councillor group appoint to be representatives of those committees do actually update their colleagues on a regular basis in relation to what is happening. The Audit and Risk Committee is probably one of the most important committees we have at this council, and obviously all of us cannot attend those meetings, which is why we do appoint people, our colleagues, to certainly represent us as well at those meetings. So hopefully going forward, I look forward to some more regular updates around what's happening at those meetings, and not just getting the report that comes into the chamber But I did just want to put that onto the record. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Shaw. Any further councillors wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Ramesh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, not repeating everything Councillor McIntyre has covered in detail. The performance assessment, as mentioned by Councillor McIntyre, which consists of a self-assessment survey by all committee members, the CEO, the CFO, and the members of the ELT that have attended, has shown consistent improvement in the operations of Audit and Risk Committee in all 10 areas of significance. This year's report concluded with an average weighted score increase from 4.5 to 5.1 out of a maximum of 6, where 5 and above suggests that the committee is performing more than adequately. So as an active representative on the Audit and Risk Committee, I'm pleased to see both the annual performance assessment and the biannual activity reports tabled today and commend them to the Chamber for endorsement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ramesh. Councillors, is there any further discussion on this matter? No further discussion. I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 6.5.9, councillor appointments to committees. The report is on pages 223 to 226 with a recommendation on 223, attachments are 227 to 236. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Ramesh. A seconder. Councillor Hill. Councillor Ramesh.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hill.
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor, are there any speakers against this motion? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As a matter of principle, I don't endorse this, but at the end of the day, there is a majority bloc who are in favour of these appointments, but I will vote against that each and every year on the basis of not agreeing with that majority bloc in terms of my...
Point of order, Madam Mayor. Mr. Mayor. This sort of calling of...
Councillor Hill, can you please quote?
Governance Rule 38.
And
This sort of comment doesn't encourage healthy conversation.
Mr. Mayor,
and it doesn't
if Councillor Hill doesn't understand her own points of order, Councillor Ramesh shouldn't be assisting her.
Shaw,
well,
deal with
needs
the
to be
point of
pulled
order.
up.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gilligan, please continue.
Thank you. So as I was mentioning, it's a matter of record. There's been various divisions in what has been a divided council, which has shown the voting records of people which have consistently voted en bloc. So we can't shy away from that. That is just simply a reality.
I do advise you, Councillor Gilligan, though, that you are getting close to the line, but I'll allow you to continue.
Thank you. And I think, as is noted quite aptly in this report, it makes the point that with the exception of the MAV representative role, councillors who have been previously selected have been previously successfully elected and appointed will retain these appointments. And of course, council officers had to change that after the coup that happened last year.
Councillor Gilligan, if you please, would you please stick to the motion?
I am, and
it doesn't mention anything about a coup. Well, so if you please go forward speaking to what you're speaking to, please. So
for those reasons, as a matter of principle, I couldn't possibly endorse the actions of the council that occurred last year, and that would be by virtue of agreeing to the appointments that have been proposed in this item. But I do think it was certainly important on page 224 to point out that component. I would put to you, Mr. Mayor, that component wouldn't have been necessary in the last term, but certainly has been in this one, which in fact is indicative of the type of culture that we have to manage here in terms of councillor appointments to committees. So for those reasons, I won't be voting in favour of this, not that I suspect it would be of any surprise to people, but nevertheless I have a right to exercise a vote. I intend to do so, and I intend to do so on these matters at every opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, any further speakers for this motion? Any further speakers against? For? Sorry, I didn't see a hand go up. Heather, excuse me, Councillor Marcus.
Thank you. At our strategic briefing last year, it was noted that Councillor Mia Shaw is stepping down from the Victorian Government's Youth Justice Community Advisory Centre, and I advised that I'd like to be able to join that committee. because a psychologist works next door to me, and he's very concerned that you can build a centre, but if we don't have the right components to assist our youth in that centre, it won't be very good. So therefore I would like to be admitted to that committee and get the advice of psychologists on what should be put into that centre, not just putting the kids in with nothing to do.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. I do apologise I didn't recheck that, but I thought that was, it's not in there? No. So if we can, without having the need to move amendments and things. Okay, thank you, Councillor Marcus. Any speakers against? Any further speakers for? Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Marcus is correct. I have removed myself from the Youth Justice Community Advisory Group. I suppose, Councillor Marcus, I would let you know that it is only about to help the development of the new Justice Centre and ensure the local community is informed and engaged as the project progresses. I've only been on the committee a short time, but personally I didn't find it very worthwhile or rewarding, and I'm actually still not quite sure what the intent of it is now, considering most of it has been completed. That's not to be disrespectful to the people that are on the committee, certainly the state government officers that do all the work for that, and for my councillor colleagues that are also involved in that, and members of the community. But I personally didn't find any value in it at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Any further councillors wish to speak on this matter? Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to thank all the councillors on board for participating and actively working with all these committees. We certainly can't do everything ourselves, and it's important that we share all these responsibilities. And that's it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
That's cool. Thank you, Councillor Hill. Any further speakers, councillors? No further speakers. I put it to vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 7, notices of motion. 7.1, notice of motion 613 Wyndham Flower Festival. Reports on page 237 with the recommendation or notice of motion on page 238 and no attachments. Councillor Marcus, are you happy to take the item as read?
I would hope so.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillor Mark, yeah, oh, yeah. Would you like to move the motion? Yes, and a seconder, please. Councillor Shaw. Councillor Marcus.
Yes, look, I had the pleasure of being in Thailand and was able to view the Chiang Rai Flower Festival quite a few years ago, and I worked on Wirama for 26 years as the sponsorship coordinator. I was then the artistic director, and then I was the artistic director and the director, and I left in 2009, and it's time now that we have a new signature festival. And I want colour in the city. And when I look back at the photographs, and if anyone wants to come tonight, they're all on this camera, all the beautiful floats that were made. We couldn't do what they do in Thailand with the flower festival because all their floats are fresh flowers. Even the King and Queen of Thailand were done in fresh flowers. My thoughts are that we would go to all of our cultural groups, we would go to our nursing homes who need something to do, we would go to our retirement villages, we would ask them to make crepe paper flowers, and then we would have all the different cultures come together to make beautiful flower floats. I think India might, I think they're fairly keen to also look at that. I think it's time that we went back and visited a really good festival, a colourful festival. We need something vibrant, happy, which the people are so down at the moment, we need to bring them up. This probably wouldn't take place until spring, but I would look at lots of stages. I would look at bringing all community members on board to be part of it. And I would certainly be bringing on Wyndham TV, to, because they're absolutely brilliant in the way that they can bring the people together. So I do hope, councillors, you will vote for this new Wyndham Flower Festival. Wyndham, Destination Wyndham, we're looking at a lot of new events to bring to this city. I will be doing the Grand Gala Ball again this year. I am going to be doing quite a few events this year, so we need exciting events for our city. And so please, councillors, I hope that you will pass this notice of motion for a business case to be put to us before February in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillor Shaw, do you wish to?
Just to thank Councillor Marcus for bringing this forward. I think it's a great idea, and certainly something we need to be looking at other ideas for events in our city. So looking forward to seeing the business case in relation to this and having further discussions about it in early 2022. So thank you, Councillor Marcus. I know this is an important part of your portfolio and something you're very passionate about.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillor, is there any speakers against this motion?
Yeah, me, Mr Mayor.
Councillor McIntyre, you're speaking against. Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. I'll get to you, Councillor Mahfood.
Thank you.
Councillor McIntyre.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I wasn't sure which one.
That's all right. That's okay.
Thank you. I'm concerned with the comparison of places and festivals. These are places in the world that are flower producers. We're Melbourne's food bowl, not Melbourne's flower basket. I think it's important for something that is very key and relevant for our community. I agree with Councillor Shaw, new ideas are great, but I think it is important for something that is relevant to something that we think will add to our community. We already have many events in our calendar in spring. I wonder which events you think may be lost or reprioritised as a result if you are looking for this festival to happen in then. And I'm also concerned about the timeline for the report to be produced for February 2022. Looking at the type of festival, my understanding, and obviously I'm sure you can come back and clarify, if you're talking about lots of floats and that sort of thing, my understanding and I do appreciate my experience in the events industry is not as experienced as your own, but I have a lot of experience in there too, would be that it would be something like an 8 or a 9 month event. You would be looking at particular vehicles. It's a very prescribed and also a very focused event. So for that reason, I have grave concerns as to if this is the appropriate one that should be put forward. I'm aware members of our community have suggested other festivals and other things which were, I would have said, more appropriate maybe for our area, which would equally be world leading, which have been sent to yourself. So for that reason, I don't think it would be an effective use of a business case. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McIntyre. Councillors, any further speakers for the motion? Councillor Mahfood, you indicated you wish to speak against. Is that correct?
Yes, please, Mr Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm not totally supportive of this. I will note that it has been mentioned in the notice of motion that if this motion was to be carried, that I would be the co-chair. I will, if it's the will of council, take that on board and would accept that. But personally, at this moment, I'm not for it. I think there are a few reasons why I'm not supportive at this point. And as Councillor Macca pointed out, it's not something our region is known for. We're known for growing vegetables. And you look at the market gardeners in Werribee South, maybe we should do something for them instead. Flowers is not something we're known of. We've got the State Rose Garden, yes, there's a festival for that. Something totally different. Look, I've looked up the Chiangrai Festival. It's an amazing festival, and it's something that we simply couldn't match. We couldn't match with that sort of elaborate, display of flowers that they put on. Also, Councillor Marcus pointed out that it wouldn't actually be fresh flowers. It would be crepe paper flowers or fake flowers. Again, this goes against some of our policies and some of our strategies, especially reducing our waste and looking at zero waste targets. A festival like this would create such a huge amount of waste. If all these floats were all made up of fake flowers, it's going to create a nightmare of waste at the end of it. I don't think we could even get the community behind it to build floats anywhere near what the floats look like at the Chiangrai Festival. There's also a mention of the the Holland Festival. I assume that means the Tulip Festival in Amsterdam. That's again, both these festivals around flower growing regions where they've got a huge history of growing flowers, a huge history of flowers in there. It's not something that we're simply known of. There's also to talk about a signature event. In my mind, and I'm not sure what others think, it's something we need to really discuss as a council group. The signature event for Wyndham has always been Warama. Warama needs to come back. Warama needs to be upheld. It's got a long history in the city of Wyndham. That's my view. So I'd like to sit with the view of others and have a discussion. So we're talking about a signature event. The previous council term did discuss this and has been put through one of the agendas of previous council terms. The signature event for Wyndham always was and always will be Warama. That's something that really needs to be discussed when we're talking about a large festival, and how can council really get behind that and support that. Councillor Marcus mentioned her involvement with Warama. I've had a long-standing involvement with that festival also.
1 minute, Councillor Mahfood.
And I had such a hard time, a different time than what Councillor Marcus had. She had council behind her. I had the complete opposite. With council behind Warama, that would be a huge, amazing festival, something that showcases our area, showcases the city of Wyndham and all its glory, something for the community, something for all community groups to get behind. That's another reason why I'm not supporting this. There's a mention of a signature event. Flower Festival is not a signature event in my mind. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There'll be more to discuss about this.
Thank you, Councillor Mahfood. Councillor Ramesh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The principle that's being put forward by Councillor Marcus, that Wyndham will benefit from hosting a showcase event, is a great idea. It has significant merit and should be seriously considered. The specific topic for this showcase event, however, is not very clear to me. Perhaps I'd be in a better position to vote in favour on this item if there was more clarity and information on what types of events could be hosted and the merits of each. I will vote against this motion today, not because it's a bad idea. I think it's, I believe, asking the council to invest in a business case is premature.
Councillors, any further speakers for?
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Councillor, Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Councillor Manor. Just because you didn't do your homework doesn't mean you vote against something. I mean, I don't know if you engage Councillor Marcus, Councillor Ramesh, but I certainly have spoken to Councillor Marcus because I wanted to get further insight, as you had mentioned, as part of making a decision on due diligence. And that's why I am supportive of this resolution in the absence of any other proposed new and creative ideas. So, look, I certainly endorse the proposed resolution. In the case of Warama, I think it is pretty clear to say that that was a complete failure near the end, and that's precisely why this council abandoned any investment in it. And it was the right call then, and it is the right call now. That project is absolutely dead, buried and cremated, and will never see the light of day again. And I think it is absolutely critical that as we move forward with the events and festivals framework that has been in motion for quite some time, that we do look to create something that is a bit more inclusive of all parts of our community, or perhaps a series of events in different suburbs. And we know that that is occurring if we take into account the resolution that was adopted around Australia Day, where we're now having Australia Day events in different suburbs. So I think on the broader conversation around to what extent does this fall into the events and activities for future programs, particularly around the festivals framework, I do agree with that component of Councillor Mahfood's conversation around us being really clear of what is our number one event and festival for this city moving forward. And I'm not entirely sure, in fairness, whether this is the number one event, but it is an event as part of a series of events that can be delivered in this city. And I know that if this does pass, we'll continue to deliver a successful events program that is administered by the council. But I do also remark on the importance of looking at the diversification of that around how we empower community groups to run community events, and perhaps with the assistance of council make sure that they don't end up as failures. But I certainly do endorse the proposed resolution this evening and commend Councillor Marcus. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Now, Councillor Zatkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I haven't said a lot this evening. I will be supporting this motion tonight on the basis that prima facie it is essentially asking for a report to determine whether or not there is merit to this. So I'm not supporting this on the basis that I support a flower festival, only that I think a report's required to make that determination. So I'd be happy to see that report come out. I think that our events team are very capable. We saw during COVID that they were able to roll out a number of very unique initiatives that were not only appropriate for the time, but also demonstrated a degree of thrift. So you don't have to spend a lot of money to have a good event. Our events team have demonstrated that, and I'm really keen to see this report come back. If there's merit to it, I'll support it. If there's not, I won't.
Thank you, Councillor Zatkowski. Councillors, can I have, any further speakers? Councillor Hegadich, and then I think Councillor Pereira? No? Councillor Hegadich anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. I wasn't actually going to speak on this item, but I will. I was actually really excited to see this notice of motion. I hate gardening. Anyone who knows me knows that I hate gardening. Anyone who knows me knows that I've got a black thumb. Nevertheless, I was excited to see something different, a bit of colour, a bit of, bit of showcasing our city. Victoria, for those that aren't aware, used to be known as the Garden State, so there is some validity in us being a garden state. And yes, we are a food bowl. Maybe we can use the broccoli and the florets to make a nice creative statue or something like that. So and all we're doing at this point in time is a business case. It doesn't lock us into floats. It doesn't lock us into how we're delivering it. A couple of vases outside a few shops. I don't know. This is why we're, Councillor Marcus, I think you're asking for a business case. Let's see what it looks like, and you have my support this evening.
Thank you. No, I was shooing a fly away, not... Councillor Barrera, and then I'll go Councillor Hill.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I think what you noticed was me nodding furiously at Councillor Zatkowski, because I have to agree, this is requesting a business case. And, again, we've had a lot of people request business cases on several things all year.
Yep.
This is asking for a business case, that's all at this stage. There are no decisions being made about a flower show, how big, how small, whatever. Broccoli, flowers, whatever we might have. So I'll be voting, I'll be supporting it tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Barrera. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When I first saw this notice of motion from Councillor Marcus, I'm really excited. I thought I would support this. Who doesn't like flowers and colours? This is a typical example, however, of many notices of motions put forward into the Chamber over the past 1 year. In this document, Councillor Mahfood is proposed to co-chair this festival, but they are both certainly not in the same page from the speeches that we have just heard tonight. The two events in Thailand and Holland were historical flower producers. They are natural things that people do to have festivals when they produce lots of flowers. It says in the report that as the state of Victoria emerges from lockdown, it is important that our residents to have something new, vibrant. Yes, you are right, Councillor Marcus, I totally agree with you. But I think as a councillors group, we need to brainstorm some of these ideas together. And I don't believe we have any opportunity tonight, before this tonight, to discuss about this as a group. In my opinion, if we were to support the businesses after this lockdown, we need to have Wyndham Food Festival instead. Food is the international language of love, and it surely will bring people of all cultures together and boost the businesses. Just one example. I will vote this notice of motion down. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Now, I think everyone's had a go, haven't they? Yes. So, Councillor Marcus, you have the right of reply.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I think if you have a very close look at the notice of motion before you all, the second paragraph reads that Council receive a business case for consideration at the February 2022 Council meeting outlining the programming budget and resourcing plan for a new Wyndham Flower Festival event to be staged in this city. I could talk tonight for 2 hours on what is going through my mind. I feel very insulted by Councillor Mahfood to say about the waste of flowers. They won't be wasted. You never ever even came to help me do Stitch Don't Ditch, where we're stopping rubbish going to the tip. And I have got plans what will happen to every one of those flowers afterwards. But we're not here tonight to talk about that. And also, when I did Wirama, the council only gave us $30,000 and we raised $70,000, and this is what will happen if the Flower Festival goes ahead. But I'm not going to talk any more about it. We will be talking with the Destination Wyndham. We will come back with the business case, and then you will have your opportunity to vote it down or to vote it up. But most likely, it will go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus.
Because I will make sure that it goes ahead.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, I now put the notice of motion to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion, or the notice of motion, is carried. Councillors, item 7.2, notice of motion 614, advocacy for Wyndham Road Network. The report is page 239 to 240, recommendation page 241, attachments are nil. Excuse me. Councillor Shaw, are you happy to take the notice of motion as read?
I'm happy to take it as read, Mr Mayor, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw, and you are moving it. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Marcus. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There's a number of issues that I've raised in the notice of motion, but ultimately the land road needs duplicating. We've been saying that for a number of years, and I certainly know previous Iramu Ward councillors before me have been saying that as well. And as we head into a state election, well, a federal and state election next year, it's absolutely important we understand what our community thinks. I'm sure the Iramu Ward councillors know what people in certainly Wyndham's West think about Balan Road. It's something we get a lot of feedback on, and none of it's good. It is causing massive congestion for our city, and there is absolutely no plan to provide any duplication of Balan Road, even though a report was done in 2012 by the Victorian State Government to do traffic modelling for the PSBs in the Wyndham West area and translate the outputs into road cross-sections and a concept intersection design for our precinct structure plans. It was titled the Wyndham West Precinct Structure Plan Assessment.
Bit of a tongue tighter, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it was done in 2012. There is some information, obviously, in the notice of motion before us that talks about that, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, only to say that it does state that Balan Road and Westbrook Drive will require 4 lanes each. Certainly Balan Road is currently 2. It is important we understand from our community, which is why I'm asking to do the community consultation and understand that so we can work through that feedback from our community and the associated action plan. Putting a notice of motion forward is actually a very important process for us to do. One, it's the only way councillors can instruct council officers to do the work that we think that need to be done, which is why, Councillor Hill, these notice of motions actually come through, and I'm not sure what the limit is or the maximum or minimum in terms of notices of motion, but they're actually a very important part of what we do. But certainly it means for us that we can understand what the issues are and advocate for our community and for the people in Wyndham West and for the people in Iramu Ward that have to deal with the huge amount of congestion that we see on Balan Road. It's a really important part of our road infrastructure. And ultimately, in the end, that traffic modelling report was why all the PSPs were approved in that area, because we were advised via that traffic modelling report that we would be getting those upgrades to roads, and they have never, ever happened. And the duplication of Bolan Road is not on the state government priority list at all. And whilst the Wyndham Westlink Ison Road is a really important part of our infrastructure, I do support it. It will not solely fix the issues that are the issues around the Bolan Road and what we're seeing that's coming in and out of Werribee there. That cannot solely take the traffic congestion off Bolan Road, and we need to look at being duplicated. We need to find out from our residents. We need for them to have their say about the priority of advocacy in the projects for Bolan Road and what we need to do going forward. I hope you all agree and support the notice of motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillor Marcus.
I'd like to thank Councillor Shaw for bringing this notice of motion forward. As I said earlier in the evening, when I was the Mayor in 2010 and 2013, we had Get Wyndham moving. We worked really hard on that. Mr. Bill Forrest and former Chief Executive Officer Kerry Thompson. We were absolutely everywhere out there trying to get more money to help the congestion in this city, and that has just fallen on deaf ears as far as both a state and federal government is concerned. Bolan Road has been a priority for us for some time, and of course, as you all know, it's growing more and more out there through Manor Lakes, which is causing a lot more congestion. The other thing that's causing the congestion is the Cottrell Street Bridge, and one of the persons working for LXRP said that when Cherry Street was closed, that intersection would become even more congested. And so it has. Trying to get out, it can take me half an hour to 1 hour to get down here at 3:30 in the afternoon because of the congestion. And so therefore this is most important that we advocate strongly to state and federal government for more money to get that done. And what is coming through loud and clear from the people is open Cherry Street again, and that will solve a lot of problems. So I put that on notice, Mr. CEO, that, and you'll probably have someone to speak to that on Monday, that if we open Cherry Street again, it would probably solve a lot of problems about the traffic around the Werribee CBD.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Councillors, are there any speakers against this notice of motion? Is there any further speakers for the notice of motion? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I certainly commend Councillor Shaw for this particular notice of motion, but what was intriguing from an urban planning point of view is, as Councillor Shaw has quite rightly pointed out, how can you have traffic modelling which indicates that there is a requirement for a 4-lane road, maps out traffic modelling to 2021, and then, funnily enough, that traffic modelling has been met in 2021, and yet there is no proposed duplication both now and into the future for a major arterial road in and out of Manor Lakes, Wyndham Vale into Werribee. I just don't quite understand how we continue to have these failure after failure in terms of state government planning models where we seek planning advice around the urban sprawl, we get that advice, the state then constructs a precinct structure plan, it gets told that these are the metrics by which you deliver a community, and then meets barely any of them. Whether it's the industrial estate in Truganina, where we're seeing cricket clubs going into warehouses that should have high density level of jobs. We've got PSPs that say that shouldn't happen. We've got the VCAT saying it can. Here's another good example in Elements Estate, where you've got land that's being overturned by the judiciary in favour of more housing when our community is overwhelmingly saying no, and then ultimately losing out on social infrastructure such as a school. So this will be an important test, I think, around that consultation with the community about, well, what do they see here? What are the questions being asked? How do we solve this model? How do we solve this problem? And I look forward to seeing that report back in March. And I think, if you compare this to Geelong and their road management plan, Be interesting to see what comes out of this resolution. But I do, again, make the point that these types of notices of motion are absolutely effective. Just only tonight, actually, we looked at one that Councillor Hill put in, which verified a number of facts around library services. In this instance, it's about having a conversation with the community of what they better understand. We want informed members of our community to understand that these are not failures that we have delivered. We have had them imposed on us. When you see housing developments being approved out in Manor Lakes where they have no necessary infrastructure, that's not us, that's the state. And so having that conversation through this model is an appropriate resolution. I commend Councillor Shaw for doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, any further discussion? Councillor Hegadich.
Thank you. Just by way of my feedback, Councillor Shaw, I think it takes me about 10 minutes to get from Wyndham Green on Bolan Road entrance to Jubilee Estate. That's without traffic. So I can only imagine what the traffic would be like coming the other way in the morning. It takes me 40 minutes to get from Bolan Road to McGrath's Road. So if you've come from Jubilee, then up to McGrath's Road, I reckon our residents are spending 2 hours in traffic just to get out of Wyndham Vale, so I definitely look forward to the feedback that comes through with this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hegadich. Councillors, any further discussion on this matter? No further discussion. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Oh, we're almost at the end. Item 8, Council Seal. 8.1, awarding of contract N400175, landfill cell 4, final cap construction. The report's on page 242 to 244, recommendation 242, attachments nil. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Zatkowski, and yes, Councillor Hegadich. Councillor Zatkowski, do you wish to?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Hegadich, no. Any councillors against? Any further discussion? No. Put it to vote. All those in favour? The motion is carried. 8.2, resubmission of revised instrument of delegation from council to staff. The report is on page 246 to 250. Recommendation on 246. Attachments page 251 to 434. Councillors, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Zatkowski. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Ramesh. Councillor Zatkowski.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. It's only appropriate tonight that I move this motion. This report was delayed as a consequence of my amendment. Firstly, I'd like to thank council officers for the degree of gusto that you entered into the review of this document. It was by no means an enthralling process to all extent.
It was like having teeth pulled without anaesthetic.
It was a little bit like having teeth pulled, but nonetheless it was important work.
Yes, no.
I have to say that I learned a great deal. The document itself doesn't contain many of the reference anecdotes that were provided to give context to the delegations that we are approving to the council. It was a worthwhile endeavour. Many changes were made to the document. There were some just simple things around administration. There was an identification of certain roles that had been removed from the organisation that were redundant in the document. There were instances of legislation that no longer exists. So by all accounts, it is a superior document that we will be passing this evening, hopefully. And I commend this report and the delegations to the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Zatkowski. Councillor Ramesh, as the seconder, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ramesh. Any speakers against this motion? Any further speakers for it? Councillor Gilligan.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I remember my governance training that I got in my first term of council was via the MAV, and the presenter, who is a very prominent part of the local government sector, said something I think sticks in relation to this resolution. She said it's important that councillors don't get stuck in the weeds around the minutiae of the operations of local government, that they stay high level and that they ultimately do what they were elected to do in that regard, and that is to set the direction on behalf of the residents of their respective municipality and the priorities that they really want to see addressed. I don't see a fruitful exercise of changing words around titles of positions of council and wasting hours and hours and hours of ratepayer funded staff to have to attend several council meetings.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. Can I just clarify Councillor Gilligan speaking in favour of the motion?
Can you quote the point of order, please?
Councillor Gilligan isn't speaking to the motion.
Oh, well, Councillor Zatkowski, I would argue that he is.
Thank you.
Within reason.
Yeah, well, yeah, so I intend to vote in favour of this, but I'm just providing context to how it can be that there has to be a resubmission by the Chief Executive Officer, which is highly unorthodox. It is highly unusual. And so what I am talking to in terms of this resolution is, the advice that I receive. Councils with concerning cultures, councils that have concern amongst the governance arrangements of councils typically get stuck in the weeds. And I've been saying this is a problem for quite some time. And this is a good example in terms of this resolution where we had to see...
Now you're starting to drift away from it.
Yep, talking on the resubmission. So where you had a requirement that a Chief Executive Officer has to resubmit what is a fundamental document in terms of the governance framework of the council. So I do support the resolution ultimately. I'm disappointed that it took this long from when it was ultimately discussed to getting to this resolution because of, in fairness to the Chief Executive Officer, you've got to make sure you include everybody's input. But if your input is to change the title of the Corporate Affairs Manager, and that seemed to be a success story of using your time here in this place to actually do things for the community, then I don't think you're going to have a second term if indeed you've, or a subsequent term.
No, that's absolutely not speaking of the motion.
All right, but,
the second term.
But I certainly think it is important that we get out of the weeds on these matters and focus more on the higher level decision making because we've got a lot of issues and it's important that we are representing the needs of the community, not getting stuck on some of the wording components of the resolution. But I'm intending to vote in favour. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gillen. Before I ask for any further speakers, I might just add that my comment, Councillor Zatkowski, was the time that we spent to go through it. I think that I've never been through it before and actually found it quite enlightening. I learned something and I thought it was a fruitful exercise for it's probably not something I want to do every 12 months, but it was a fruitful exercise. Councillors, can I have a speaker for?
Yeah,
yes, Councillor Marcus.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank Councillor Zatkowski. As you all know that I've been here forever, life is about learning, and I think I missed two, but the two that I came into, I'd like to thank the council officers for the work that they did, that they put into it. It certainly was enlightening, and I learnt a lot. And councillors, every day when I wake up, I want to learn something new, and that's why I believe that with what I've been doing lately, it's been fun, it's been wonderful working with the residents, and I want to keep working with them, but I need to make sure that I know what we should know so that we have every confidence when we're speaking to our residents. So, Robert, thank you. Thank you to all the council officers, and thank you to you, Mr CEO. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Any further speakers, councillors? No further speakers. There was no speaker against Councillor Zatkowski, unfortunately. But we will put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried. Item 9, questions of notice, questions with notice from the public gallery. Mr CEO, do we have any questions?
No, Mr Mayor. None
Not
this evening.
one. Okay, thank you. Item 10 on the agenda is other reports. 10.1, Internal arbitration decision reports, page 434 to 439. Recommendations for page 436. Attachments 440 to 447. Councillors, do I have a mover of this item? Councillor Shaw. A seconder. Councillor Gilligan. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I do want to just say a few things in relation to this matter. I am pleased with the findings of the arbiter. A finding of misconduct under the Local Government Act is a serious breach of a councillor's obligations. This matter was a deliberate attempt to create an impression that I was improper and had breached my Local Government Act obligations. I have not. Let me be clear. The allegations made were untrue. The Local Government Inspectorate complaint, the one leaked to a media outlet, has been closed. No sanctions were given to me. I do not have a conflict of interest in asking for a master plan for Soldiers Reserve and College Road. I would like to say that my brother was also implicated in this unnecessarily and unfairly. My brother has volunteered for many local sporting clubs and this year was awarded the 2021 Club Official of the Year by the Western Region Football League. He has also been recognised as a Laylaw hero by our Labor federal member, Joanne Ryan. In my opinion, he also deserves an apology. He is a tireless worker and volunteer in this community. The arbiter found that the comments made were a disingenuous opportunity at political point scoring. The arbiter also found that I was not treated with dignity, fairness, objectivity, courtesy and respect. I look forward to receiving my public apology and for the matter to be finally closed. I also intend to continue to advocate for the Soldiers Reserve and College Road Master Plan for the people of Iramu Ward and Wyndham. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw. Councillor Gilligan is a seconder. Do you wish to speak?
Probably briefly, other than to say, I mean, this clearly was, in my opinion, a character assassination that absolutely, obviously, has been found unfounded by an independent arbiter. And it is a high threshold as someone who has been subject to this process this term. It is a very high bar to be found guilty in terms of a breach. And obviously, the arbiter has determined that the councillor in question in this report was guilty and has outlined the reasons why. But, you know, I think this is an important lesson about just because we've got councillors that are passionate about projects that really reflect their community doesn't mean we can just go after them and try and make it personal. And I've always found, in terms of the best debate, the best conversation we have is to debate the merits of a project rather than the person. And sometimes you get a mix of that. But at the end of the day, there is intent around making sure that the community comes first. So I certainly echo the comments by Councillor Shaw as seconding this resolution. It's an unusual way to approach the adoption of this process. I think it's a new thing in the Local Government Act. I've not seen this in terms of the approach where a determination has been made, but really do put on the record that I look forward to Councillor Shaw presenting an argument around Soldiers Reserve and giving it the merit consideration at that point.
As do I, Councillor Gilligan.
Good to hear, Councillor Maynard, Mr Mayor. Certainly I think this is a community down there in Werribee that has been deprived of investment for so long, and so I think it is reasonable for us to be looking at that Soldiers Reserve master plan opportunity, which I'm sure Councillor Shaw will present at the earliest opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Councillors, any speakers against this decision? Any further speakers for it? I put it to the vote. All those in favour? Against? You're abstaining, Councillor Zatkowski, as is your right. Now, seeing the motion is carried, or the recommendation is carried, I should say, councillors, as required by the arbiter's order, I will now call upon Councillor Zatkowski to make a verbal apology to Councillor Shaw. The apology will be recorded in the minutes of the council meeting. Councillor Zatkowski.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll preface this by saying this is my first 12 months. It has been a challenging year. I'm not going to pretend and say that coming in as a councillor I have known everything, or that I, as of today, know everything. Clearly, I've erred in my judgment, and therefore, Councillor Shaw, I apologise to you for the comments I made to the media and the resultant breaches to clauses 3.1 and 3.4 of the Wyndham Councillor Code of Conduct. The independent arbiter found that, through my conduct, I did not treat you with dignity, fairness, objectivity, courtesy and respect, and that my comments could have been misleading to the public. This has been a learning experience for me, and I wish to express my sincere regret.
Thank you, Councillor Sikowski. I do appreciate that.
Thank you, Zatkowski. I will now move on to the remainder of the meeting. And item 11 is urgent business. We have nil. Item 12 is confidential business. We have nil. So the meeting is closed at 9:04. Thank you, councillors. Great meeting.
Good night all.